In order to liberate all sentient beings, let's aspire for the great bodhicitta. So let's continue with the Shuragama Sutra. In fact, before this, I would like to make an announcement, or rather address a few things beforehand. The first is that there are many people who are listening to the online classes. And I am aware people comes from different people coming from different schools. That's really wonderful. So many people are listening to this class. In fact, it's quite important to study. In fact, this kind of continuous studying will encourage our actions as well as our mentalities to continue to advance. Without such kind of continuous study, then our wisdom as well as our behavior will then stop progressing along the path. So studying and practice, I really hope that everyone could get along with one another, because I know that people coming from different schools, who are studying under different teachers, who belong to different sects, if we have this kind of a mentality of contradicting with one another and slandering against one another, then as a group, we do not have any harmony, especially for us who are currently studying Mahayana. Then from bottom of our heart, we should have this sense of love and compassion towards one another. And inclusiveness, this is quite important. Sometimes when I go to different centers of different schools, sects, or even religions, if they have different conflicts between one another, then it is very difficult for other people to have a sense of devotion or belief towards them. Therefore, I think it's quite important to remain simple, because simplicity is difficult for human beings rather than animals. Human beings have lots of capacities, and if we were to have this intention to create conflicts, then it is easy for human beings to do so. Anyhow, after studying Dharma, I think it's quite important to maintain simple. Whatever school, whatever religion, even with or without religion, I think we should try to get along with one another. We should be inclusive. We should be gentle towards one another, whomsoever they are. I think this is quite important. In fact, I stated this a few days ago in a class as well. I think we should have a sense of gentleness towards one another. Do not harm one another, whomsoever you meet. I do not, in fact, appreciate those kind of practitioners who have too much edge in their personalities and do not mix and mingle within any kind of group and community. So that's the first thing I would like to address. And second one I would like to address is that in our daily life, in Larangar or other places, I really hope that you do not overly exaggerate things unnecessarily. Do not make things more complex than it already is. In fact, sometimes things could be very simple. As in Tibetan saying, we say that do not try to throw other people into the river, otherwise you yourself might in turn drown in the river. I think when it comes to dealing with different matters, it's quite important to maintain simple rather than exaggerate. Some of the Sangha members have lots of habitual patterns that they used to have when they were working in the society and so on. But we should remember the law of karma. Whatever you try to do others may then reflect upon yourself. Sometimes you may harm others at the same time of harming yourself, and sometimes you may only harm yourself without harming others. Anyhow, as a Dharma practitioner, the least requirement is that we should eradicate, we should cut off any kind of intention of harming others. As Buddhist practitioners, in fact, sometimes they are only named as Buddhist practitioners. Their actions are very much of extreme, and their actions are not really in accordance with the Dharma. I think it's quite important to remember of the principle of not harming others. Otherwise, it is quite a shame to call yourself a Buddhist. The other thing is that in terms of the merit, and talent, and capacity, in many different aspects, I think as a Buddhist group and community, we've already made quite a bit of progress. Because now when we look at the Buddhist community, we see that there's a surge of talents and a surge of people of different capacities. This is really wonderful. As monastics, of course, we don't need any fame or wealth or any of the 8 worldly dharmas. However, as lay practitioners, I think we do not necessarily have to give up everything and not care about other people's saying and feelings and so on. Otherwise, if you do not consider about your own reputation and wealth, you may be lag behind. Therefore, I encourage those of you who are lay practitioners to continue with your career, with your business, with paying responsibility to your family, and so on. This is quite important. From different aspects, I can see that the merits or the merits from different aspects for Buddhists are getting much better. Because without merit, you won't be able to bring benefit to others, such as maybe providing job opportunities for others or providing any kind of benefits and help towards others. We should strive to build a community that is of great merit, including in terms of wealth as well as fame, so that we can bring lots of impact to others. Without impact in this age, I think it's very different. It will be very difficult to propagate the Dharma. Of course, for the monastics, we do not long for any of the 8 worldly dharmas, including wealth and fame. However, as monastics, we should still encourage the others to join in all kinds of beneficial activities for all human beings, for all beings in this world. Because without such kind of guidance through the monastics, it would be rather very difficult to practice all kinds of beneficial activities in this world, in this society. I'm not sure if it is because of our practice of mandala practice or so. I really notice that the Buddhists are getting much more along with the people around them, including their family members and their social group. And lots of the Buddhists, their merits are much better than they used to be. They're more beautiful, they're more wealthy, and more famous, have more influence. I think this is really wonderful. And lots more young people who have great capacity and great talents also became Buddhists. I think this is very encouraging as well. From certain aspect, Buddhist talents, or rather talents who then became Buddhists, and the Buddhists who have lots of influences are getting more and more common in this community. And for this group of people, I really call upon you to try your best to make more effort into propagating the message to others and make lots of beneficial contribution to the society whenever it is possible. So those are the 3 things I would like to address before the actual class. In general, I really feel that lots of the Chinese practitioners I see that people engage in studying of Tibetan Buddhism as well as Chinese Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism. This is quite important to study all of the 3 because these are the wisdom that's taught by Shakyamuni Buddha. It is only the teachings are spread into different areas and taught in different languages according to different cultures. So in such a way, we should acknowledge that these are the wisdom of the Buddha, and we should not accept one and reject the other. On top of studying the Dharma, we should also have the curiosity to study different kind of knowledge in this world to gain more wisdom. We should engage in research, especially for those of you who are very good at studying. For a group of you, you can then particularly do your research in Shuragama Sutra, in Vimalakirti Sutra, Lotus Sutra, in the history, in the Chittamatra school, in different biographies of masters. So you should engage in the research in particular aspect and focus your effort in one particular area, just like nowadays the Western scholars would focus in one particular area of their research. I think in the West, it is also correlated with the funding that they could receive. But for the practitioners, I would really encourage you and advise you to particularly study one sutra or shastra or school. In such a way, I think it would be very beneficial. Also, in your mentality as well as your behavior, you should often watch your own mind. This is quite essential as a practitioner. In this lifetime, we've already encountered such profound Dharma. I think this teaching that I've been giving in the past few classes, I really feel that it's almost like the Vajrayana teachings. And in our lifetime, we have such precious opportunity to study such dharmas and profound truth. And since we have this opportunity, we should cherish it. We should receive this dharma with great joy. For Shuragama teaching, the beginning of the Shuragama Sutra, I observed the dependent origination, and through the observation, I felt that the propagation of Shuragama Sutra in the Chinese, in the mainland area, I think it will be quite propagated. It will be quite prosperous. However, when it comes to the Tibet as well as other Western countries, maybe the propagation is not as prosperous. However, when it comes to the propagation of the Shuragama Sutra in the Chinese area, in the Chinese mainland area, it was rather quite auspicious. Yesterday, during our after-class, during the after-class presentation, the Chinese presenter felt really touched and got tears in her eyes. But for the English presenters, they were probably too nervous. And yesterday, during the after-class discussion groups, the English presenters had used the Chinese rather than English. I think in some ways this shows the codependent origination. Of course, you don't have to believe it. I myself only believe halfway, not fully. You don't have to believe it fully either, because it's not scientific, and so to speak. During the pre-class chanting, I did notice there are some auspicious signs. There were this beautiful rainbow that appeared over Larongar. On one hand, it's very normal for rainbows to appear in summer over here. However, the rainbow that appeared yesterday was rather quite special, because it first appeared the rainbow and then started raining, rather than usually it rains and then rainbow would appear. So that was quite unusual. Also, there was thundering and lots of the sound, and I would like to show you a clip. I myself feel that it may not be the auspicious sign, but they wanted to show this video to others, and I didn't reject their proposal. On one hand, I think the rainbow appeared over Larongar on the day, in fact, right before the teaching of Shuragama Sutra is auspicious. On the other hand, I won't grasp too much onto it, because there are so many people, they really like to do palm reading or different kinds of predictions, especially the ones who want to ask about others about their previous lives. But even if the other person who's giving you such predictions doesn't know anything about his own previous life, how can you trust his or her saying about your previous life? So I don't really grasp too much onto these kind of signs. I know people nowadays, they like the signs, and the sign of rainbow and beautiful clouds and so on. Those could be some aspects, but the most important is the inner signs, the inner realizations. Of course, I'm not completely rejecting this either, because some of the appearances, some of the signs could be auspicious, just as when Ponsuk Rinpoche went to the deer park and give empowerment. There's some really unique and gorgeous white clouds appeared. Also, when he came back to Larongar, we were then started building the new shrine hall, and at that time, the same kind of rainbow also appeared over the sky. So Ponsuk Rinpoche at that time appeared to be happy, and he said that because of such sign, then our teaching and study could probably continue for a longer period of time. So afterwards, we felt that it could possibly true, because afterwards the different kinds of things that we encountered definitely shows more auspicious coincidence. But I wish that you do not grasp onto this kind of signs, because we haven't even started this teaching of Shuragama Sutra, where it talks about do not grasp and do not get attached to different signs. Otherwise, you are then being fooled by the demons. So before the Shuragama Sutra, let's not get caught by these kind of signs. The Shuragama Sutra is in fact quite difficult and different in some ways than the previous teachings of the sutra. Therefore, lots of the scholars, they do not then recognize that they do not recognize this because of some terms that's used in this sutra. But the scholars, I don't think the scholars have read the Uttara Tantra Shastra, where it talks about there's a self-existence, there's a true bliss, the true purity, as well as permanence. That they must be really terrified upon reading such kind of sentences. So you can't really just attach to certain sentences. Previously, in the last class, we've already talked about how the previous masters attached great importance in this sutra. The Shuragama Sutra in Tang Dynasty was translated around the 7th century, and then later on in the Yuan, Ming, and Song Dynasty, great masters in those dynasties, they propagated this teaching widely and wrote lots of commentaries. Western scholar cataloged the complete number of all the commentaries written on the Shuragama Sutra. In total, there are 127 copies. Master Jibo, Master Oyi, Master Lin Chi, who are great Chinese masters in Ming Dynasty. In fact, they all really attached great importance in the studying and propagation of this teaching. Master Xuyuan, Master Hongyi, Master Yingguang, as well as Master Yuanying and Master Taishu and Master Danshu, who was the author of in memory of the city of illusion. So great masters that they studied this particular sutra, the Shuragama Sutra, especially around early 19th century. Lots of masters invested their time and lots of effort in the studying of this sutra. The previous masters give lots of teaching and commentary on this sutra. However, as the later generation, in fact, there are very little number of people studied this sutra. So I think we should really try our best to propagate this teaching, to propagate the correct Dharma. Many abbots nowadays, I know that there are a number of abbots who are investing their energy into building Buddhist colleges. However, majority of them, they then look for different kind of statuses, and they look for different opportunities to build monasteries or be in a leadership position or president of certain kind of associations and so on. If your position and status is beneficial to others, of course, it's fine to do that. But what I feel is that when it comes to the propagation of Dharma for the monastics, it in fact is not buying land or build monasteries or build associations. Rather, it is to have a small center to give teachings and propagate the Dharma teaching, so that people around that area would understand and know how to tame their minds, so that the monastics could then take up the role of leading and guiding the local people. Anyhow, in general, it seems that it's really degenerating, especially when it comes to writing commentaries, especially after the 19th century. The masters give teachings in different places and different monasteries. I know that there definitely are masters who are teaching, but it is when it comes to the influence, when it comes to the impact of such teachings, I think we all understand and we all can see the impact is much less than when it was back in 19th century. I think lay practitioners, when you want to protect the Dharma, you should also help the local masters to then give the teaching, to then use such wealth and fame to benefit others. Cultural Revolution, in fact, made great detrimental impact in many places. In Tibet, at that time, was quite destroyed in many places, and I really hope that when it comes to building different kind of lay practitioners or residents, when it comes to school building and so on, I really hope that it could be continued as well. But what's more important than those is that I really hope everyone could be in synergy in terms of supporting the teaching of the Dharma and the propagation of the Dharma. That's probably more important than the other aspects of benefiting the others. So I really hope that everyone who's listening to this class could make the aspiration to propagate the teaching. You don't really have to raise your hand, but I really hope that you could make such aspiration silently in your heart and remember this. Otherwise, there are people who would easily raise up their hands and forget right after when they put down their hands. So let's get into the actual teaching of Shuragama Sutra. Let's talk about the name of Sutra first. In fact, it is quite important to have the name. Otherwise, without the name, people would get very much confused. According to Lankavatara Sutra, it says that if designations are not said, people of the world would become confused. In order to dispel their confusions, the designations are established. The masters of many places, the previous masters would usually quote this to explain the why we need names. So we all need to relate to the sutra or anything with a name, with the words that describes it. So Shuragama Sutra also have this name, and the name, in fact, could help the ones with high capacity to fully understand the whole content, and to help those ones of the medium capacity to only understand the rough content, and for the lower capacity, the name helps the ones to then find the sutra. So we definitely need a name, otherwise we won't be able to find the roads or the mountains and so on. And there are different types of names of sutras. Some of the names are some of the names refer to different people, such as Amitabha Sutra and Vimalakirti Sutra. Some of them are based on the Dharma that's taught, such as Parinirvana Sutra as well as Prajnaparamita Sutra. And some of the sutras are based on metaphors that's used in the sutra, such as the Precious Clouds Sutra, Rice Sapling Sutra. So Rice Sapling Sutra, where it taught the 12 interdependence with the metaphor of rice sapling, as well as the Brahman Sutra. On top of that, there are the sutras that's named based on both the human as well as the Dharma, such as the Kshitigarbha's Aspiration Sutra. And then there are the ones that use both the name and the metaphor, such as Tathagata's Lion's Roar Sutra, where it talks about the Tathagata is the name, and then Lion's Roar is the metaphor. And then the ones that's solely with the metaphor, such as the Lotus Sutra. On top of that, there are the ones that has all three, where it talks about the great extension of the Flower Adornment Sutra. So it used all of them. And out of all those, then this Shuragama Sutra, it has both the name, the person's name, as well as the Dharma that's taught, and the metaphor that's used. So let's look at the title of the Shuragama Sutra. So Shuragama Sutra, the full title is that the Sutra of the Foremost Shuragama at the Great Buddha Summit concerning the Tathagata's sacred cause of cultivation. So this is rather a very long title. Therefore, usually we would refer to this sutra with a short title, that is the Shuragama Sutra. The first one, it says the foremost Shuragama at the Great Buddha's Summit concerning the Tathagata's sacred cause of cultivation. So let's look at this. What is the Great Buddha Summit? It has, in fact, two aspects. In the first one, it refers to that the Shuragama Sutra is the summit of all the Dharma, is the top of all the Dharma, just as how they refer to with our Tantra Shastra as the top of the teaching. Therefore, over here it says that Great Buddha Summit. So summit, it shows that it's a top of the teaching, and then the Great Buddha is the Great Enlightenment. And over here it means that Shuragama is the foremost in the human world, the human realm, the unsurpassable Tantra, you can say that. Or with metaphor, you could say that the Great Buddha's Summit, you can say that is the Buddha Vajrayana. And another way of explaining is that great is the great Dharma, and Buddha is the unsurpassed. So it's just as the summit or the top of the head of the Buddha that cannot be measured. In a sutra, it says that when Buddha was in the deer park, there was a bodhisattva who came from the eastern Pure Land, and he wanted to see where the Buddha's top of the head is. And then this bodhisattva used this numinous penetration and went all the way up. But even after many, many worlds and he couldn't see the top of the Buddha's top of the head. And then he said that, how I wish to see the top of the Buddha's head, but I cannot. So it's very difficult to find the Buddha's summit or the top of the head, because it is immeasurable. When the Buddha was just born, his top of the head was in fact really tall and cannot see the top of his head, but then it disappeared until he attained enlightenment. So what it means is that such sutra is in fact the tip of the top of the head of the Buddha that cannot be measured. And then over here it says concerning the Tathagata. The Tathagata is the one who have already realized the truth of all phenomena, and for such a kind of enlightened one is called Tathagata. Also, it is one of the 10 names of Tathagata. One of the 10 names of the Buddha. According to the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, it says that his birthlessness, non-extinction, agelessness, and is undying, unbreakable, and indestructible. He is not anything created. Hence, his name is as a Tathagata. And then it says that it's the Tathagata's sacred cause of cultivation, just as the Tantrayana teaches that the Tantrayana is also called the sacred mantra vehicle. So over here it talks about the sacred cause. And it is a cause. If we can practice such kind of cause, then we will be able to receive the fruition of Tathagata. And what is the fruition? Such a fruition of Tathagata is to completely realize the truth of all phenomena. And the third one, it talks about the cultivation or practice. So this teaching is not understood through thinking, through any kind of dualistic manipulation or any conceptual thoughts. In fact, it is only understood through practice, through cultivation. All the teachings that is included in this sutra is the ultimate teaching. In the Dharma teaching, we usually talk about there are the ultimate and relative teachings. And in this sutra, the teachings that's included are the ultimate teachings, the ultimate truth. This sutra talks about how the first Bhumi Bodhisattva all the way till the 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva, their self-benefit as well as their other benefits, as well as their activities of the relative as well as the ultimate. All of such teachings are included in this text, in this sutra. So all the sacred cause or the sacred meanings of the Tathagatas are included in this teaching. And then it says it's the foremost of the Shuragama. Shura is the ultimate, and then Gama is sturdy or steadfast. So that's what it means. The Shuragama. In the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, it says that Shuryo means the ultimate of all things, and Gam means strong, as the ultimate of all things is strong. We say Shuragama, so the Shuragama Samadhi is made to stand the Buddha nature. Hwawajuma, that's in Tibetan, it means that it is then sturdy. According to Mahaparinirvana Sutra, it also says that the Shuragama Prajna and Buddha nature and Shuragama Samadhi, they are the same thing. It means the same. So the Shuragama over here, it also refers to the Samadhi. It is more than meditative absorption. It also means it's a realization, the highest level of realization possible. So whomsoever could attain such Shuragama Samadhi, such kind of realization, one cannot be destroyed by the heretics as well as the demon. At the beginning, it seems that there's the story of the demons, and talks quite a bit of how to then defeat the demons and so on. In fact, it talks about the pith instruction of how practitioners could surpass the demons, how to attain such realization that could then surpass the demons. Lots of commentaries, they give quite a bit of teachings on these titles. Some of the commentaries are very difficult to understand due to its language. And I then basically generalized all the teachings and briefed it to you. And the sutra, according to the Dharmachatas Sundry of Abhidharma, where it says that this so-called sutra contains 5 meanings. The first one is to bear or to give birth to. That is, the sutra could give birth to lots of meanings. Yes, it seems that Shuragama Sutra is rather thin, but it could give birth to lots of teachings. And the second meaning is that a water spring. If our wisdom is capable, then through the teaching, our wisdom will continue to gush out, just like how the water spring would continue to gush out, and it cannot be exhausted. And the third one means to review all different types of meaning. The first one is to give birth. And this one, to review. To review means that something that was hidden, but now it is revealed, just as the Buddha nature. Everyone has Buddha nature, but it is hidden, so you have to review it. Just as the Buddha nature's meaning is hidden before, but without the sutra we won't be able to understand. Therefore, it is to review. And same as emptiness and other teachings. And the fourth one is carpenter's line marker. Just as how carpenter usually use a line and dip it into ink and then make a line, that's how they would guide their work and so on. So the sutra would guide us in the same way, to guide us towards the right and avoid the wrong. And the fifth one is to string something like a garland. It could then strain all the teachings together, just as how different flowers that's gathered together can be strained together with a single string. So the ultimate, the relative truth, and all the different teachings in phenomena can all be strained together through the teaching of sutra and review of its content and the meanings together. So that is how the sutras are different than the texts that we would read in the world, than all the worldly texts. Therefore, if one person could have the time and energy to study even one sutra, to spend the time of whole life to study one sutra, one cannot completely understand it because such meanings of sutra is so profound and very expansive. Now let's look at all the translators. The first one is Pramiti. Pramiti came from the mid of India. At that time, Pramiti was the main translator. He first would then, from the Sanskrit to translate. He himself knows 4 kinds of languages, and because he himself wrote down this sutra as well as brought the sutra, so he's quite familiar with this sutra. Therefore, he was the main translator. And the second one is Ujjayana, someone from Ujjayana, or from the northern part of India, a Shramana whose name is Mitya Shatya. And he was the co-translator. At the beginning, the translation was translated by the main translator, and his job was to, word by word and sentence by sentence, going through rather quite in detail. And then there's another Shramana whose name is Huaidi. He came from southern part of China, and he was the proofreader, because this monk was fluent in both Chinese as well as Sanskrit. He also helped in translation of the Sutra of Great Heap Jewels. So at that time, he helped in the proofreading of translation. In Tibet, we see some great Losavas or great translators. They also needed editors as well as proofreaders and so on. As translators, I think it is the best if they can have they can have the people from two translators coming from 2 different cultures, the both cultures, because when it comes to the translation of different texts, there are the culture as well as the language barrier that 2 translators working together would be the best to then express the most of the meaning of the text. Lots of Indian Panditas as well as Tibetan Losavas would work together to translate all together. And then usually it would note in the text saying that who was the main translator, who was the co-translator, and then sometimes they would also say that, oh, someone was the previous translator, and then someone translated afterwards. Someone from Kashmir or someone from somewhere in India came and translated again or retranslated on top of the previous version that's translated by so and so. Anyhow, all of these kind of translation versions would be noted down in such a way in the Tibetan texts. And Fanrong has rather long title, therefore I'm not going to read his title. So the lay practitioner Fanrong was the one who Fang Rong was the one who was the Chinese cabinet and who was then later the prime minister of the province of Canton. And because he was a great literator, and therefore he then extensively edited and rewritten and polished. And maybe that's why the later people felt that the sutra was too beautifully written. I think maybe during the polishing aspect of this text, Fang Rong also incorporated some of the words that's used in Zhuangzi as well as lots of the previous traditional teachings. Huaidi, who was the monk who did the proofreading, some of the more ancient texts included his name as the one who did the proofreading. And then in the later texts, the later editions of this sutra, especially the ones that's currently circulated in Korea and Japan and so on, his name was not included. Master Lian Qi proposed, rather than questioned about why his name was not included, and especially considering he was such an important figure in this translation. Anyhow, there are also some kind of saying that some said that Pramita went back to India right after translating this text. It is said that Huaidi, because he stayed around the Canton province, the southern part of China, and lots of the monks from different places would travel to this place, and that's why he knows how to speak both Sanskrit as well as Chinese. In Chinese mainland, there are some controversies about this sutra, and later on, whenever we have time, we'll probably explain a little too much about it. We'll explain a little more about it. Lots of controversies on if this teaching is authentic or not. In fact, around that time, a very minimal number of people questioned this sutra out of no founded evidence, but such kind of idea got then later propagated and created detrimental results. I think this is considered as a slandering of the Dharma, and it could be very dangerous. So for Buddhists, I really hope that we do not do that. When you slander a Dharma that stopped other people from studying it, then I cannot say that if such kind of people have less of karmic debt to people than those of the butchers. It's very difficult to say. I think as mundane beings, we should not then discriminate discriminate based on our conceptual idea what is right and wrong, and especially if we're only parroting others. Some said that the Great Cloud Sutra was the commentary on the Great Cloud Sutra was then not authentic, and it was manipulated by others to please the empress at that time. And some said that out of frivolous intention, saying that Fang Rong must have wanted to butter up the empress. Therefore, Fang Rong, he himself wrote this sutra to please the empress. But the commentary of the Great Cloud Sutra, in fact, it has a prediction saying that the Empress was the manifestation of Lord Maitreya. But this sutra was not then translated or was not really wrote to impress the empress, because at that time, by the time of finishing this translation, the empress was already died, and this sutra was already well known around 492, and that translation was included in the Dunhuang. Was included in the Dunhuang caves. It was discovered from the Dunhuang caves. But some scholars, they felt that, well, maybe not. They have lots of such confusions. Some of the kings, emperors, and great lay practitioners, there were some predictions included in some of the texts, and in some of the sutras where it in fact predicted that there will be a celestial being who was then later reborn to be as an empress to guide and to rule a country. Some of such kind of teaching could be true, could not be. But when it comes to the manifestation of a bodhisattva or manifestation of a Buddha even, I don't think that's the correct description. However, she indeed made great contribution to the propagation of Buddha Dharma. But my point is that there is no point for Fang Rong to make up a sutra to flatter the empress at that point, who was already dying at the time. And I think the main cause of such a kind of rumor of this sutra being a fake sutra or counterfeit sutra is mainly because of this Japanese scholar named Mochizuki Shinko, who, out of no deep research, just simply saying out of frivolousness, saying that this could be non-counterfeit sutra, and then later got lots of attention, and this idea started getting promoted, and that was only in the early 19th century. There was a scholar who, in fact, there was a scholar who works at San Francisco State University, and he pointed out all the previous causes and reasons, as well as the historical reasons and the various reasons that people usually use to say that this is a counterfeit sutra, and stated that those kind of reasons do not have any solid foundation. I think this is quite important for you to read as well. In the early 19th century, Liang Qichao, as well as some other famous Chinese scholars, under the influence of the Japanese scholar Mochizuki Shinko, they also parroted his idea, and they felt. And then they, without deep research and studying of this sutra, started saying that how could there be description of celestial beings or sages in Indian philosophy, there is no celestial being or sages. It is only stated in the Taoism teachings. Therefore, it must be written by Chinese. I don't think that's valid at all, because sometimes the particular translation is based on the translator, and sometimes we all know that in the other sutras it also stated that there are celestial beings and sages. According to the Tibetan Tripitaka, there's the particular rules of how to translate different names, how to translate different sentences, how to end each sentences. There are different regulations. Despite those kind of regulations, each translator have a very different writing style. Therefore, you cannot ask every translator from different age to have the same kind of writing style or same kind of translation and terminology. And let's also look at different translators, such as the English translations and so on. Their writings and their style is very different. Some of the polishing aspects are really well done, really excellent, and some of them are rather quite average. But Liang's idea was that because this sutra is too well written, therefore it cannot be a translation from a Sanskrit text. And that doesn't make any sense at all, because it is completely based on the translator himself. And because Fang Yun was rather a really good writer, and his translation and the polishing was really well done, really beautifully written. Anyhow, despite all these kind of ideas and different kinds of reasoning, I do not see any solid foundation under their evidence. Master Xu Yun, he stated that in different historical texts, in fact, all of the time and the dates, the place, and the translators, the followers, and so on, those are all specifically pointed out in all those old commentaries and in different commentaries, different historical texts, and it all connects with one another. And if you do not believe in this historical text, yet you only believe in some scholar's random remark, it would be quite laughable to then make the sutra as a fake sutra. This is quite a hasty conclusion. For lots of us who do not have the perfect wisdom, we should not parrot one another. We should not parrot how other people would say, especially following the teaching, following the other people's words of, oh, this is counterfeit and this is not genuine, and so on. There are people who have not dedicated their life and time in studying this or any kind of sutras. They're not really a professional in the Buddhism study area. They do not have the perfect. They do not use the perfect logic, nor their direct perfect cognition that a Buddha have. They only use their rather very shaky evidence to support their conceptual ideas. So without the solid logic, without the threefold logic, and without the founded evidence, you should not just parrot other people's idea by saying that this is counterfeit. For the Buddhists, I really hope that you should have faith and devotion, because without such, you won't be able to understand such profound sutra. So use your wisdom and devotion, and do not parrot others. I'm sure there will be some kind of controversies because of the teaching of the Shuragama Sutra. And also, I'm sure that they do not want to create a chaos because they want to make a mess of this teaching. They must also want to find out the truth of whether this teaching is true. Just as I myself am not a physicist, I have never really attended the systematic study of physics. And if I were to write a book and publish a book on physics, would you think, as a scientist or a physicist, that I am doing something beneficial for the society? You probably wouldn't think so, because I'm not a professional, I'm not a physicist, and how can I publish a physicist book? Similarly, if you're not a Buddhist, if you're not someone who engaged in long-term studying and researching in Buddhism, I really encourage you to then invest your time into studying and then invest your time in this rather than making hasty conclusions. I think lots of people, there are people who do not have faith in this text. You don't really have to try to pursue them. But there are people who have lots of faith, and there are people who are halfway through. So for those kind of people who are somewhere in the middle, who do not have the firm faith nor the complete denial of this sutra, then I think we should teach them and tell them why this sutra is so important and so profound, rather than following other scholars' hasty conclusion that this is counterfeit. So that's my intention of my explanation. Studying and practice is very different. And I know nowadays the Western idea is that the teachings of Vajrayana is unnecessarily secretive. They feel that it's very unnecessary. What's so secretive about it? I understand that they came from a scholar background, but at the same time, I would say I really wish that you could respect the cultural background and religious background of the teaching rather than only try to follow their idea. In fact, when it comes to Buddhism, if you're not professional in Buddhism, if you're not professional in Tibetan Buddhism nor Chinese Buddhism, you should not make any comments about it. So Shuragama Sutra, it is a teaching that is infused with blessings. And Master Hanshan stated that this sutra belongs to the empowerment category. And in the Qianlong Tripitaka, it is included in the Vajrayana catalog. So it does include the pith instructions of Vajrayana, therefore it is included in such catalog. When we're studying in this sutra, we should try our best to understand the pith of the Shuragama Sutra, and we'll stop here today.